News for now. I'm Noah Haswell on 99.3 FM, AM 1230 WBVP, 95.7 FM, and 1460 AM WMBA. Also streaming live around the world at beavercountyradio.com.
Thank you, Noah. We have another guest in our studio. I'm excited about this one, too. Rodger Morrow. And Rodger, you're a modest guy. I'm going to read your bio for you, though. But editor and publisher of Beaver County Business, a Yale-educated journalist and communications veteran. Morrow made history in 1975 at the age of 21 when he became the youngest person ever to serve as a speechwriter to a U.S. president, writing for Gerald R. Ford. He went on to an accomplished career in political and corporate communications before turning his focus to the region he knows best. Today, through his publication Beaver County Business, he brings the same sharp, seasoned voice to the stories of the people and enterprises driving Beaver County forward. Wow.
Wow, that sounds so impressive. I'd like to meet that guy.
I'm humbled you're here.
Yeah.
But you and I met at the Seven Oaks Country Club, and what I discovered is you're also an enthusiast for local radio, and you have written a radio history of Beaver County, and it's fascinating, the digging you've done to talk about what we're doing at this very second, giving people live radio.
Well, exactly. And, I've been involved in one way or another with radio and television and newspapers pretty much my entire career. I mean, again, speech writing doesn't exist in a vacuum, and all of those events that I wrote speeches for were extensively covered by media. And so, I started you might say, in the news business the moment that I became a speechwriter, and so that's been my so I was sort of on the other side of the microphone, so to speak. But that's been my.
You've written this article called "A Radio History of Beaver County," and a point you make is that while radio has changed the look, the shape, the sound of it, the one thing that has been maintained and preserved, it's community connection.
Well, it's the glue that holds communities together, radio and newspapers, but unfortunately, as you well know, Scott, having been at the Times, the newspapers, locally owned and managed newspapers are vanishing all over the place. I think I found a statistic that nearly 3,500 newspapers have closed in the United States in just the last 20 years alone. And, 40% of local newspapers have disappeared just in 20 years. So it's a vanishing, and again, I think the only printing press in Western Pennsylvania is the Butler Eagle.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I think they are now going to be doing both the print edition of the Trib and the Post-Gazette. So that's going to be an interesting, and all of the newspapers are consolidating. There's a group at Point Park that they have a media center at Point Park that is going to serve as kind of a clearinghouse for news, because you don't have enough people to cover everything that needs to be covered.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a frightening thing, because we're kind of losing, you used to see a local, county meeting, and there would be, 4 or 5 reporters there. Now there's nobody, and they, hear about it afterwards, and from the politicians. Well, the politicians kind of like it that way, because there's no one holding their feet to the fire.
No watchdog. Huh?
No watchdog. Nobody asking the tough questions.
I covered county commissioner meetings in Beaver County in 1994, 95, and there would be me, there would be another reporter, there would be Beaver County Radio, both sometimes WMBA and WBVP. Right. There would be at least 4 of us in the room. Now Noah, who you just met, is at their work sessions, and that's really the only journalism they have there, or any communications there is us covering that one meeting. So,
yeah. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that's why I literally woke up in the middle of the night and said, where's the local media? I mean, where's the local newspaper? And, there had been, fleetingly a, local paper that covered, stuff around the courthouse and so on. I don't even know if they're still in operation or not.
The Beaver Countyan?
The Beaver Countyan,
yeah.
yeah. And, but
I haven't heard from them in a while. Yeah.
no, they've kind of fallen off the map, and they were doing some very good work. And so, I thought, well, I'm not going to try to fight with them over the courthouse, but I can cover the business beat. And, and business is a huge part of this county. So
Talk about, so it's called Beaver County Business. Where do people get it? How frequently does it report? And
so we publish 5 days a week. Most of the writing is done by me or a few stringers, and but I edit everything, and it's kind of an interesting. It's been an interesting journey, and we also have an AI generated podcast, which is bizarre. People don't realize it sounds like you're listening to a show on NPR or something, and there was a man and a woman sort of in a similar format to All Things Considered or one of those NPR shows, and I feed it the article that I write and they discuss it.
Oh, wow.
And you would swear that these are real people, and they're bringing insights. And I don't know where all this is created through a service of Google, which currently is free. And
do you get to choose like the voices you want? Or
no,
you
you just you get these two voices. They don't have names, but they call the show The Deep Dive, and they take your article and explore it in depth.
Wow.
And
the robot coming after my job.
Why? And very often after I finish writing it and I run it through the AI, they'll pick up on things that I hadn't considered, and I'll go back and rewrite the piece again.
It's kind of an editor too.
Yeah. So it's like having my own, like editorial committee.
What news do you want to get out there about Beaver County businesses? Is it like if there's a new startup, as if it's someone's changing hours or doing something different with their product line, or?
Well, I'm trying to put things in a broad, very broad perspective. I mean, this county is changing so dramatically, and the days of steel mills are mostly, not entirely, because you still got Tenaris, but mostly over. And now we're seeing the rise of power generation and data centers. Mm-hmm. And you were just talking about the new one out at Pit Race, and that's going to be an enormous thing. And until Elon Musk figures out how to put them in space.
That day's coming.
We did an article about that because, I started researching, like, how is that going to affect, local data centers. The good news is because of the latency issue of sending data from space back to Earth, there are certain things that, will still probably be done, on the planet, and other things that can be done, that are not as urgent, that can be done in space. But it's a crazy world that we're moving into.
Very fastly too.
Yeah.
Well, Beaver County Business, is there a print edition? Can I pick it up somewhere? Is it entirely online?
It's entirely online, and it's online at bcbizpa.com.
Okay.
And you can sign up for the newsletter on the website, and then every day you'll get a preview of the article of the day, and you can decide to read it or not, but at least you get a 200-word glimpse of what we're about to publish. We want to eventually expand beyond that, but for basically what is a one-man band, I think we are offering quite a bit. And we, so far have not put anything behind a paywall, but that will be coming at some point. And we've been very blessed to have people contribute to help defray some of our expenses.
Well, that's one thing we share with you. One of the many things, but Beaver County Radio, we like to spotlight businesses. We have a thing called the Best of Beaver County. Every Thursday, we find a local startup business or entrepreneur. And it's always interesting to me the stories that they have. They're varied how they decided to get into it, but they all have a passion. They all recognize ahead of time it's going to be long hours. It's going to be, struggle at the very beginning. But you just have that faith that you have something to offer,
right?
That people want.
Well, we're both a startup and a business covering startups.
Yeah.
And it's I feel very sympathetic to entrepreneurs in Beaver County or anywhere. I mean, it's a and most new businesses fail. So we have to give them as much local encouragement as we can.
Yeah.
So again, without falling into sort of mindless boosterism, we try to support the businesses that we think have good people behind them and good ideas and will bring good things to Beaver County.
Again, it's called Beaver County Business. Talking to Rodger Morrow, the editor, and now that's a name. I hear the name Morrow. I think business. I think there was a Morrow car dealership. Is that
That's
your
right.
family?
My dad was in the car business for close to half a century. First as a used car dealer in Beaver Falls, and then as a new car dealer, starting in 1948. And he was, very, very active, both, as a local figure, but also within Ford Motor Company. He served 2 terms on the Ford National Dealer Council, which is really, it's sort of the representative body of dealers that, tell the factory, this ain't going to sell.
I wonder if they still do that. Do they still?
I think it still exists.
Okay.
And the one thing that I remember very well was trying to talk Henry Ford out of the Edsel. Did not go so well.
Oh, it didn't last long, but
Yeah.
They lost some money on that.
My dad came in just as they were in the, putting the Edsel out.
Really?
Yeah, they were, readying it for production. And
1959, right?
Yeah, so that came out in 59, and it was, anybody from the outside could see it, and it was an incredibly well-made car, and they really expected that it would, eclipse the Lincoln and everything, and it was supposed to be both, all the best of that Ford Motor Company could produce, and but it was just too expensive for the time, and
Is that what it was?
features that people, didn't care about.
Was it any way ahead of its time?
It was in many ways ahead of its time. It was incredibly well designed and intended to be a tribute to the Edsel Ford, who was, only briefly head of the company before he had to step down, I think, for health reasons. So, yeah.
So you watched your dad running a very big car dealership and being a influencer to the Ford company. What did you learn from business from that, seeing your dad in action and how he interacted with the community and other businesses?
Well, I mean, again, he had a very hometown philosophy that, the customer was always right. If we screwed up in any way, he would make it right. And I remember, going in with him in the morning, both as a little kid and for the year that I worked with him in the car business. And, most of his morning was spent dealing with customer complaints, there were little things, but to the customer, a big thing. So, I learned a lot about customer service from him and how you make,
That's how you develop brand loyalty.
brand loyalty
Yeah.
and, and he had a lot of, a lot of repeat business. And so, that was, and he also, by the way, he was an international businessman. He had a business in the Bahamas, Ford dealership in the Bahamas that he had in partnership with a Canadian and British guy. So I grew up with that too, and Bahamas was kind of our second home, if you will. Yeah, it was rough. It was rough. Grand Bahama Island, and it was at the time at the point where people were starting to vacation and wanting to find something different than just going to Miami or Fort Lauderdale or whatever, and the Bahamas offered a different cultural experience.
It's pretty high on my list of places. I mean, literally, I was pricing plane flights the other day.
Okay, well, white sand beaches, and and the thing that attracted my dad was that as a development incentive, they created in Freeport a tax-free business climate, so you did not pay taxes on any profit that you made there. So.
Now, the Morrow dealership, does it exist in any way, shape, or form? Did it merge?
Well, it was sold to Ron Lewis in the 90s and 80s, and my dad had the ownership of the building for about a decade under Ron Lewis, and then they ultimately went their separate ways. And I think it's now Ron Lewis or his daughter Gwen, I think, has sold it to someone else. I don't, I see it there, but I don't know. I think it's a Kia dealership now primarily. Mm-hmm.
So along the way, besides learning business, you take an interest in radio. Talk about your affinity for radio and growing up, and what were some of your earliest memories of listening?
Yeah, well, I remember, we had the radio was, we lived. By the way, in Chippewa, in one of the most remote corners of Chippewa, so I didn't have a lot of playmates or whatever. So we had television and only a few channels, and you
had to get up and change the channel. You didn't have a remote control.
Oh no, there were no remote controls, and TV was black and white, and we were lucky to be on a hill so that we could get the broadcast signal. But I remember listening, if we didn't listen to WBVP, then it was KDKA. And, my dad was friends with Ed Chauncey. I think they went to school together, if I'm not mistaken. And so he had, ties to KDKA. And I remember one year he took me to a baseball game, and he said, do you want to meet Bob Prince?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So he took me up into the broadcast booth, and, during a commercial break, I met,
the gunner.
The gunner. Yeah. My hero. And this was in the years when the Pirates were, stalking a pennant and ultimately a World Series championship.
That's what got me into radio, even before I became a music lover, listening to baseball at night, and you could pull in a St. Louis Cardinals game from your house in Beaver County,
Right, yeah, and I would listen at night. I had a little pocket transistor radio, Japanese made, and a little, headphone that I would listen to radio on. And I remember many nights falling asleep listening to the gunner, or some Pirate game from a or distant location. So, yeah.
Your article you wrote, and again, the title of that is The History of Beaver County Radio, and you talk about the beginning, going back to 1948 when WBVP signed on.
Right.
You talk about that. I had some fun today. I talked about the first studio was above Rio Grill on 7th Avenue, and one of our loyal listeners, Howie, called and talked about the Rio Grill, and he remembers what that was like and the best roast beef he's ever had.
It was legendary, and you smelled it, from the studio. It must have driven those people crazy.
Chuck Wilson, the first announcer, his opening statement on radio: "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WBVP now takes to the air." And there's a picture of Chuck hanging behind my head, and that's just a name I hear over and over. What made him such a special figure in radio?
Well, I mean, he did it all, and that's the thing that people may not understand about radio is I mean, you had, not only to be an on-air personality, but you might have to use a soldering gun or,
that hasn't changed.
yeah. Or, they were very much all-rounders, and they covered, everything from sports to breaking news. And, there was the, famous, and sometimes you would intersect with history. And there was that famous call that I mentioned in the article where right after Ronald Reagan was shot, he called, he I guess wanted to speak to, was it Gene Atkinson?
Yeah, the Aldequippa legislator.
Yeah, and he wanted to find him, and he was told the switchboard at the White House said, well, he's doing a radio interview. So Reagan just picked up the phone, called right into the station. And somebody with a little presence of mind, after he had his conversation with Atkinson, said, Mr. President, would you like to stay on and talk to the public? And so for 2 minutes, Ronald Reagan addressed the listening audience of WBVP and made international history. I mean, the BBC covered it. It was a big honking deal at the time.
That was a worldwide story because Atkinson switched his vote, and it was pivotal.
Yeah. So a lot of things happened in that phone call.
You talk about the other stations. There's WMBA, which of course we are now part of as well in Ambridge, and then the one I just learned about today. There was one in Rochester, WRYO at 10:50 a.m., which signed on in 1949. Actually, Rochester Township. It would later move to Butler. It's now what's known as WBUT in Butler. But interesting.
So I mean, but again, there was a lot of competition for this market, and you had WMBA had a more of a top 40 format as I remember it, and more music focused, and where WBVP was more news and sports and straight up radio.
This article you've written, A Radio History of Beaver County, is that on your Beaver?
Yes, it's on and
County Business website.
Beaver County Business website, and one of the things that we try to do, since we don't, we're not set up to cover a lot of breaking news or send reporters to commissioners meetings and so on, because it's mostly me and who I can, arms that I can twist into contributing. So one of the things that we do is, look at the history, where did Beaver County, how did these Beaver County institutions originate? And then, we're trying to look in, use our little crystal ball and look into the future and, where are they going? Will steel come back? Will data centers replace steel?
Is there a movement for redevelopment of downtown areas? We see all these streetscapes. Monaca's all torn up, but they're rebuilding. Ambridge did that. And,
Right. And, you were talking about Leroy Ball, for example, who's a Monaca native, and, he's, quietly, helping to rebuild the downtown Monaca, and Emmanuel Paniotakis, with whom I share a web guy, is putting a whole new gallery in what used to be the railroad station or railroad depot there.
He's an award-winning photographer.
Oh, he's phenomenal. Yeah, absolutely phenomenal.
Well, tell you what, we're going to cut to a quick break, and then in the tradition of people like Julie Bologna, Mike Romai, Sam Nicotero, John Poyster, Bob Pompiani, and more, we're going to have our Noah Haswell do the news. Hold tight. Songs You Know and Love by the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac will be performed to perfection at the Beaver Pool House Summer Concert Series this July and August. First comes the World Turning Band, providing its acclaimed Fleetwood Mac live experience July 17 at the outdoor Pool House stage. The special guest is award-winning singer-songwriter Stephen McClintock. Then, on August 15, backed by popular demand, Seven Bridges returns with its ultimate Eagles experience, rocking the Pool House. 2 nights, 2 legends, see you at the pool. Tickets start at $15 with reserved seats $20. Get your tickets now by calling 724-650-3690. That's 724-650-3690. You also can buy tickets with a QR code from any Pool House concert signs you see around Beaver, or email landcpromotions2019@gmail.com. When you're suffering from lower back and neck pain, it may be tempting to stay on the couch all day, but that's just a prescription for more pain. Although getting up and moving might be the last thing you feel like doing, physical therapy and exercise can be the best way to reduce pain. It's time to call Dale Reckless at MRS Physical Therapy in Bridgewater and Cranberry. At MRS Therapy, they believe in promoting wellness and injury prevention by designing customized treatment programs to meet each patient's specific needs. Don't let lower back pain or neck pain ruin your active days ahead. Call Dale Reckless at MRS Physical Therapy today. MRSphysicaltherapy.com or call 724-728-7550.
We're talking with Art Cornell from Beaver Cemetery and Mausoleum. Art, tell us about the cremation garden at Beaver Cemetery.
Our cremation garden is a very affordable burial option for families choosing cremation. Burial in our cremation garden provides a 62% savings over a traditional burial.
Why do some families choose cremains burial over options like a decorative urn in their home?
More people today are opting for something long-lasting. They want the ease and lower cost of cremation, but still want to memorialize their loved ones in a more permanent way.
And your cremation garden gives them an affordable way to do this?
Yes. In addition to a 62% savings over traditional burial, our cremation garden gives families a place to visit today and preserves their family heritage for generations. And everything your family owns at Beaver Cemetery will be protected by our Perpetual Care Fund.
Friends, you can learn more at beavercemetery.net.
Beaver County Radio's news source. 99.3 FM, 1230 WBVP, and beavercountyradio.com. Here's Noah Haswell.
Good morning. On this Thursday, May 28th of 2026, we will have a complete Beaver County radio weather forecast after we take this look at news. Commissioner Jack Manning congratulated the CEO of Koppers on being named to a role in the Allegheny Conference at yesterday morning's Beaver County Commissioners' work session at the county courthouse.
Beaver County's own Leroy Ball, the CEO of Koppers, is being named as the new executive director, the chair of the Allegheny Conference starting in January, which is a big deal. As you know, the Allegheny Conference, Pittsburgh Regional Alliance, and the Pittsburgh Chamber are the preeminent 10-county area economic development entity. Work a lot with the SPC and all of us and different folks, but Leroy is a great guy, Monaca native originally. I guess he lives in the center now, but it's great to see a local guy like that who's heavily involved and invested in the community here in Beaver County being named.
The Beaver Falls Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank distribution, which is normally held on the fourth Saturday of the month, will take place on Saturday, May 30th due to the Memorial Day holiday, and it will be held in the cafeteria of Beaver Falls Middle School from 10:30 a.m. to noon. Participants are asked to bring a cart or shopping bags, as 40 to 50 pounds of food are typically distributed during the event. 4 people were injured in an explosion at a dairy plant in Lawrence County yesterday. First responders were called to the Dairy Farmers of America facility at routes 19 and 208 in Wilmington Township just after 10 a.m. for reports of a fire and explosion. According to WFMJ, responding officers said the fire was out when they arrived. One person was flown to a Pittsburgh hospital and another was taken to a hospital by ambulance. 2 others were treated on scene for minor injuries. A GoFundMe campaign has been launched to help the family of 2 sisters who died in a house fire Monday in Forward Township. The Butler County 911 Center received a call around 5:30 p.m. for a fire in the 300 block of Old Route 68. Dispatchers said an elderly woman was reported to be inside the home at the time of the call, but contact was lost during the incident. Pennsylvania State Police said 2 people were found dead inside the residence. The cause of the fire remains under investigation. The GoFundMe to help the family can be found on our website at beavercountyradio.com. And public education advocates are urging Pennsylvania schools to limit screen time and artificial intelligence as concerns grow over increasing overuse among children. Here's more from Danielle Smith.
According to the Pew Research Center, 4 in 10 teens say they're online almost constantly. Speaking at the National Press Club this week, American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten unveiled a national proposal that suggests a series of screen bans and AI restrictions. It supports active hands-on learning in schools while curbing technology in classrooms.
And in this era of TikTok and YouTube, which drives rapid shifts of attention, there is a growing concern about students' ability to sustain focus and to persist through challenging learning tasks.
While the Pennsylvania Department of Education has outlined AI considerations for school districts, it hasn't issued formal guidance. Danielle Smith reporting.
Here's the Beaver County forecast.
Today it'll be mostly sunny with highs reaching 73 and overnight lows dropping to 48. Tomorrow look for sunny skies with highs of 77 and lows of 54. And Saturday we can expect to see more sunshine with highs of 72 and lows of 49. I'm Lisa Marie with your Beaver County weather.
On this Thursday, May 28th of 2026 at 37 minutes after 9, we've got a temperature of 66 degrees with fair skies out there currently in Beaver County. And that's a look at the news for now. I'm Noah Haswell on 99.3 FM, AM 1230 WBVP, 95.7 FM and 1460 AM WMBA. Also streaming live around the world at beavercountyradio.com.
Scott Tady here, joined by Rodger Morrow. We've been talking with him about his publication, Beaver County Business, which is online. You can read about what's going on in the business community right here in our community. Rodger also, as part of that website, has a radio history of Beaver County, a fascinating article looking at the history of radio here in the county, including this very station. And at some point, and let's make it now, I got to ask you about being a young man writing speeches for President Gerald R. Ford.
Well,
how does that happen, first of all? Wow.
Well, I had done some work. My dad was very active in Republican politics in Pennsylvania, and so I had done some, and I'd worked on a campaign for Ralph Scalera back when I was just a pup. I had just got my driver's license, and I was driving Ralph around in a campaign car and so on. And so one thing led to another. I worked as an intern for Hugh Scott one summer in Pittsburgh, and then ended up applying for a White House internship. And so miraculously, I ended up in the intern pool, who were mostly friends of Jack Ford and Susan Ford. But so I was one of the rare people that didn't have a personal connection. And for whatever reason, they decided to put me in the speechwriting department, and which was called the Office of Editorial Affairs or some phony title.
Bureaucracy.
And so I ended up being surrounded by some exceptional speechwriters, because while Ford himself was not a great public speaker like Reagan or people Obama and known for his oratory, but because he wasn't good, they had to get the very best. So I had, people like Bob Orban, who taught me how to write comedy, and he had written for like Red Skelton and Carol Burnett and all these, famous Bob Hope. He was Bob Hope's main writer for many years. And so, I had people like him and Aram Bakshian, who was a White House legend, and many others. And James Humes became my mentor later on when I worked for Dick Thornburg as a speechwriter.
Anything stand out of a speech you helped craft, or was there a
Well,
marching order?
I
This
will
is the
tell you. I
anniversary.
will tell you a funny story. This was my first. So I talk about starting at the top. So I'm, first speech I ever write is for the President of the United States, and I give it to my boss, and it gets heavily edited, and but he says, Rodger, the President's going to give your speech tomorrow afternoon. Would you like to go hear it?
Wow.
And I almost fainted. And he said, yeah, it's over in the Rose Garden. I'll write you a note so you could go over. And so I, go over to the Secret Service entrance at the, across West Executive Avenue and hand this note. And this, very classic Secret Service guy comes, yes, sir, just come with me.
Mirrored sunglasses and a suit tie?
Sunglasses, the little headset, the whole thing. And, of course, packing, some big, nasty revolver. So they didn't use automatics in those days. But anyway, he, takes me back into the Rose Garden. And, I said, well, I'll just sit in the back. He said, no, you sit up here and right in the front with me. So, so I'm sitting there and it's like half an hour, the longest half hour of my life till, the president finally came out of the Oval Office and he's walking toward the podium. And I swear this happened. Chevy Chase did not script it. But he tripped over a microphone cord. And so my speech, which had been typed on little index cards, goes flying everywhere.
No.
And the Secret Service are down on the grass, pulling all these 52 pickup, putting all the cards back together in order. Ford waves them off and said, "That's okay, I'll wing it."
Oh.
So I think I heard like about 5 words that I had actually written, and some of them were and the. So it was it was a very humbling experience. It got better after that.
That was part of his image, his legacy. He was a little bit clumsy. College football star, but he
had
fun with that.
Yeah, he had a knee injury when he played at Michigan, and it haunted him. So he had one fall coming off Air Force One, and that's all it took. And so and whatever it was, 1974, I want to say, was when Saturday Night Live premiered on NBC. And so the writers just had a field day with his supposed awkwardness. He was actually not awkward. It was just that his knee would, actually the guy who was really awkward, I'm told, and because there were some Nixon speechwriters left, it was Richard Nixon.
Oh.
Yeah, he just had 2 left feet. But for whatever reason, they didn't pick on him.
But did you receive, I don't want to say marching orders, but it was an important speech about policy or about, were you told, here's a directive, we're trying to get people to focus on this or think about that?
So over the course of the summer, I got, after my initial disaster, I got more serious stuff to do. And by the end of the summer, I did a televised, and of course they videotaped in those days and sent them out to local stations. So I did his Labor Day message, and that was just a little over 50 years ago now. Wow. It's very humbling to recall that. But of course, because we had a lot of the same kinds of issues with inflation. Ford had those whip inflation now buttons that were kind of ridiculed.
Gas prices were very much an issue.
Gas prices were a big issue, and so on. And unemployment was becoming. This was when they invented the word stagflation. You weren't supposed to have, inflation and unemployment at the same time. So this was a very important message, and I was, excited to be part of it, and I I did get a lot of help with that. So.
Now, after Ford, were you writing speeches for anyone else? Or?
Well, I wrote for Dick Thornburg after.
That's okay. State governor. Okay.
Yeah. So when Dick ran for governor in '78, I signed on with, and it was right after. I was kind of lucky because right after Dick won the primary, they did a poll, and this was back before polling was public polling. It was all privately done in what would today be called an internal poll, and they discovered that Dick was like 30 points behind Pete Flaherty. So a whole bunch of people quit the campaign, including the guy who was writing speeches for him, who was a professor at Pitt, and had written a book on presidential speech writing, and and it's like, they're going to hire me, but they did. And and that's where I got, my real taste of like writing speeches with substance, because Dick would go around to different key organizations to win endorsements. And I would have to get down in the weeds of, like what these people care about. And, so I went from writing, the Seinfeld speeches about nothing to writing, which were most of, they called them Rose Garden rubbish back in the.
Have you seen it evolve? Like when you listen to or you see political ads now or you hear speeches, has it? I mean, are we looking at rose-colored glasses and thinking there wasn't mudslinging back then as well?
Oh, it was terrible. Yeah, it was. But people didn't, and this brings us in a weird way back to the local media, because there was so much news locally, people didn't pay attention to the same degree with that they do now with cable news. I mean, the people who watch, get all their news from Fox or MSNBC, are probably, only occasionally your listeners, and they probably can name, more, cable news personalities than they can name Scott Tatey or.
It's a good point. I never thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it, and it's unfortunate because I think it's been very divisive, and and with the rise of social media, it's a toxic combination, and here we are on the, sitting in Beaver County, and most of our news, unfortunately, is coming from, like I think we chatted about this earlier, like this, what is it, news alerts of Beaver County
on Facebook.
On Facebook. So you've got like a quarter of the county subscribed to a Facebook group, and the first question they have is, does anybody know? I call it DAK. Does anybody know? And then and then about XYZ, and then somebody chimes in, and it may be factual or it may be complete BS. And, and all kinds of wild rumors circulate in that group. And, that's where I see, what you're doing the Lord's work here, just simply keeping the news factual and tamping down the rumor mill.
Because it spreads so fast on Facebook, and people don't bother to read the whole story. And if a newspaper has an error, they run a correction the next day, and people can see that. But you don't see that on Facebook sites.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. And it's like, so you can create a stampede of public opinion that has no basis in reality. And
it's a great word for it, stampede.
So, yeah.
Well, Rodger Morrow, we're talking with who has the Beaver County Business Magazine, and we'll go back to that in a minute. But we've talked about, since you're also a radio historian, the changing face of radio, and that's something we do. We're right now on Facebook. We're talking on here, and
right.
What do you see about that as far as how radio has had to adapt? And do you like everything about it? Is there anything that concerns you? Or?
Well, I mean, again, Facebook is a double-edged sword. I mean, the Facebook Live that we're doing right now is absolutely fantastic, and it lets people see, who Rodger Morrow is, and they can see my logo, and it's bcbizpa.com.
There you go.
But that's that's all to the good, and you can reach well beyond Beaver County, and there are things that are shaping the national story, happening right here.
Yeah.
So that is to the good. Does anybody know journalism or non-journalism is the flip side of the social media. So again, it's a double-edged sword. I don't want to condemn social media outright. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a great public square for debate, and but it can sometimes get toxic.
Well, I'm going to start making a point of checking out Beaver County Business, your online publication, so I can stay informed. Or is there anything you're working on now? Any articles or series you want to highlight?
I have a story coming up shortly on the newspaper history of Beaver County. That's sort of the bookend to the radio history, and I'm going to talk about the history that goes all the way back to 1807 or 1808. A guy named John Barry started.
The Argus, was it called?
The Minerva.
Minerva. Okay.
The Minerva.
That's right.
Who was the goddess of, among other things, commerce. So she's kind of my babe for Beaver County business
from the beginning.
Yeah, but so that was, and it came out I think weekly, and for this princely sum of $2 a year, you could subscribe to the Minerva, and that was the beginning. And of course, if you want to go all the way back in Western Pennsylvania, you go back to the Pittsburgh Gazette, which was the forerunner of the Post Gazette.
It was like 1787 or something like that.
Yeah, and that was started by a guy named Hugh Brackenridge, who, beyond just being a newspaper guy, basically, he incorporated Allegheny County, carved it off from Westmoreland County, established the University of Pittsburgh. I mean, he was a giant in his day, but he's mostly remembered now as one of the early novelists in the new American Republic, and he wrote something called Modern Chivalry, which is a Western Pennsylvania kind of parody of Don Quixote.
Oh, no kidding.
So you have a guy named Captain Farrago, who's sort of the Don Quixote figure, and his sidekick, Teague Regan, who is the sort of archetype of the Irish politician that you fondly remember from things like the movies like The Last Hurrah, and that was an archetype in those days, because it was the beginning of Irish immigration to America.
Go back and read that.
Yeah.
Rodger, we have about 2 minutes left. Where else can people track you down? I'm sure you're a fabulous public speaker. Do you have any events coming up otherwise?
Well, not currently. I did give a talk at the Beaver Area Heritage Foundation back in, I think, beginning of March on Aaron Burr, who, believe it or not, came to Beaver County and tried to start an insurrection. This was after he shot Alexander Hamilton, and there's a story in there about in Beaver County Business about the talk that I gave. So if you missed it, you can read it online.
I always say all roads lead to Beaver County somehow, whether it's Lewis and Clark, Aaron Burr, or
absolutely.
a sports celebrity.
Yeah, and Fort McIntosh, which was the first home of the American Army, and General Mad Anthony Wayne, and I mean, we can go on and on about the historical, things that happened here.
Well, it's been a lot of fun talking to you, Rodger Morrow. I would definitely want to tell people one more time the website.
Yes. Okay. So you can find me at BCBizPA, BCBizPA.
I might
.com.
I might start reading some of your stories online, but I'll make sure I give credit to you. That's one thing. As a former journalist, I get news from other places, but I always attribute it.
And I try to do the same. And you know, when I bring perspective, you know, there are some interesting people, you know, that I find, you know, who are, you know, probably not well known, but have, you know, interesting economic ideas and perspectives. And, you know, I try to give them, you know, credit to.
We definitely have to have you back in studio again sometime soon. This hour just flew by for me.
Yeah, same here. I enjoyed it very much.
All right, Rodger, if you missed anything out there, you can catch up with it. It's on our YouTube page, also on our Facebook page, WBVP WNBA. Rodger, thank you so much.
I thank you, Scott.
All right, you take care.
Bye.
The NASCAR O'Reilly